Hi, alright, how you doing everybody? This is an experiment. I don't know if it will work or not, so let's just see. Let's just see. Uh, my name is Adam and I'm trying to start a new series, a new season, and why? Because I want to put more content on YouTube and I have lots of opinions about music and I thought it might be interesting to start sharing them with people and getting people's opinions and stuff and getting some conversations on the go. So what I'm going to be doing is looking at some of the most notable songs, really, since pop music began, and particularly controversial songs or songs where there's some kind of, dispute or some sort of controversy, and just looking a bit deeper at that and seeing what you guys think. So I thought I'd start things off with a very old song. It's 51 years old now, is that right? Blimey. It's The Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. And it's interesting that I'm starting this video journey off with a song that effectively marked the end of the Beatles. So excuse me, edit that out. When one door closes, another opens. Got to watch your levels as well. Now this song's really, really interesting. If you know about the controversy behind it, then sorry, I'm boring you again. But it's an interesting story and it raises lots of questions. If you don't know it, I'll fill you in. Up till the White Album, the Beatles albums were pretty much recorded chronologically, record some songs, put them out. What happened after the White Album was things were sort of going a bit off the rails. The White Album itself was pretty fragmented and it wasn't really the sound of one whole band. They had their moments and they all played on most of the songs, but effectively it was John's work, Paul's work, George was starting to do his own, and it wasn't very cohesive. Great music and a sprawling double album, but after it I think it was a general feeling, certainly from some quarters, maybe more Paul than anyone else, that they should get back to being a band. Someone had the bright idea that they would film the rehearsal sessions and then they'd go and do a gig at the end of it, which is not a bad idea, behind the scenes with the Beatles, warts and all. Unfortunately, as anyone who's in a reality TV show knows, and I've been watching loads of Kitchen Nightmares, I'm sure it's the same, the minute you stick loads of cameras and recording crews, or TV crews, oh god, phone alarm's going. This is going to be very slapdash, but that's kind of the charm of it. I'm not going to be over producing it, which we'll come on to shortly. It's relevant. It's going to be naked, as it were. So the Beatles, they decided to do this filming of their rehearsals, and it's really not going well. They've got these cameramen everywhere. They're sort of looking for trouble. The way that reality TV works. Now, this is still in the 60s, so it's years before reality TV. But the Beatles, as always, sort of spearheading a lot of things that would become sort of more mainstream. So they wanted to do this kind of warts and all film. And it actually ended up just being a farce. John and Paul were barely speaking. George was frustrated that his ideas were getting kind of poo-pooed. There's one famous scene caught on camera where George and Paul are having an argument over a guitar line. Well, I'll play it like that if you want me to play it like that, or I won't if you don't. It's it's gone Australian. It's not very good at accents. So you have this very kind of rancorous with an R, environment. In fact, I've heard some outtakes from the sessions, and they're really, really... It's really hard to hear because you're hearing just the sound of the band falling apart. John Lennon's like, oh, I need a snort. He's clearly on his planet. Yoko's around. Paul's kind of trying to hold the whole thing together, but he's kind of in denial. Ringo's just sort of a spare prick at a wedding, really. Paul's even been secretly overdubbing his drums. And George has got some really good songs, really coming into his own, but he's really on the verge of becoming a solo artist. So anyway, this sort of abortive film, it never got released, it never saw the light of day, and they sort of scrapped it. with the songs never released, and they went on to work on what would be their final actual recording album, Abbey Road, which is an amazing album. Really brought the band back together again as one unit. Now, after that was released, they still had all these old these old Let It Be songs. Let It Be being the name of the film, and they didn't really know what to do with them. The sound quality was appalling. There were sort of fragments of songs. They were badly played. There was rumours even that John was trying to sabotage some of Paul's songs by playing deliberately badly. Some of the material was really good. Some of it was a bit iffy. All in all, though, what happened was the album, for the first time, they didn't stick with George Martin. I think even he'd sort of washed his hands of the whole thing. Phil Spector, who at the time was not the murderer that we know now, but he was one of the greatest producers of all time, certainly back in the 60s. And even as far as the late 60s, he maybe hadn't had as many hits on the pop charts, but he was still highly renowned. And I think he was quite good friends with John, because in the 70s, and it's interesting, in the 70s, both John and George would go on to use him as a producer. So whatever we think of Phil Spector now, I think you have to say, going into it, certainly two of the four Beatles were huge friends and fans of his, George and John. He was given all the scraps of Let It Be to try and work with and to try and produce something half decent from all of it. And as part of it, and particularly with this song, A Long and Winding Road, and John's Across the Universe, he put loads of orchestral stuff on, all these big sweeping violins, even sort of operatic singing. Now, over the last sort of 20 years or so, Paul has been really, really violently opposed to what Phil Spector did, to basically what was just a piano ballad. I'm going to play it one more time in the background. Should we try and find another version? Because I've just been playing Phil's orchestral version. Paul got very, very kind of vocal about, the song shouldn't have all these kind of violins and sort of female singers. The Beatles never had female singers. In fact, I've got here's Paul doing The Long and Winding Road live. He thought it should be a stripped down piano ballad, and eventually there was Let It Be Naked came out, which was Paul's kind of reimagining of the whole thing, a remix minus all the Phil Spector stuff. And so the debate, it's taken me 8 minutes to get here. I'm going to have to get a lot more... now that alarm's going. So amateurish. There we go. Basically, here we go. Here's Paul doing it live. What the debate is whether Phil Spector ruined the song or not, or whether he made it indeed the whole album. And I'm going to say, I think Phil Spector made the song. And that's the controversial thing here. And I'm interested in your opinion, because a lot of people disagree. I've heard people call it musical vomit, what he did to it. He made it very easy listening in a way. He made it kind of very bloated. I think what Phil Spector captured, and this is why I like it and why I think it's honest and why I think it's worthy of debate. I think Phil Spector basically recognised that the Beatles were dead. And in a way, maybe he killed it off. And he gave it this massive, great big Americanised funeral, if you like kind of Elvis's funeral. Phil Spector, I think, saw instinctively that the Beatles were transcending into something else now. They were no longer a live band, still gigging or anything, or really a creative force. This, I think, in Phil Spector's mind, was the kind of... it was like a last rite, if you like. It was a funeral thing, and that the song sounds funereal. I think it's really interesting, and it's Paul's very almost unaffected voice. In a way, doesn't sing it brilliantly, but in a way, that's what makes it so good. It's very raw. It's very on his level, anyway, on the vocal level, very raw. And I can see why, from his point of view, as the songwriter and the singer, that's what he wanted. But the question is does the songwriter and does the singer always know what's best for their own song? Is that maybe the role of a producer? Now, it could be argued that if I write a song, that I should be the one who decides, basically how I want my song to sound. But is that always the best? Sometimes someone else can actually do something with a song. Even if I wrote it, they could hear something in that song, or they could be able to look at me as a songwriter and where I was coming from, and maybe see things about myself that I didn't see. And I, whatever people think of Phil now, 50 years ago, let's say, he did have his finger on the pulse. Even then, he was probably horrible in his private life. But he understood music, and I think he understood the Long and Winding Road in its context. Basically, it was the end of an era. Paul, very sad, almost in denial. Kind of a love song to John, a bromance, not sexual, but I think really he was even subconsciously maybe singing about John leaving him standing there. I don't know really. It's not about micro-analysing the lyrics. I think you'll find as I do this with a lot of these videos, it's not about saying, oh, that word really means that. It's more about the overall tone and the emotion, and the kind of underlying background behind a lot of these songs. So I think with A Long and Winding Road, I think it was probably subconsciously Paul acknowledging, this sort of friendship with John was maybe crossroads. And I think Phil Spector extrapolated from that, and he saw this as the end of the Beatles. And it's almost like the last song in the film, with the credits rolling. So I think that's what Phil did with The Long and Winding Road. I'll try and cut this off after 15 minutes. I'm surprised I've even got 15 minutes out of this, to be honest. This series could run and run. There's still quite a bit to talk about. There was a real war of words between Phil and, Paul and Phil. Phil Spector said something like, I don't want to get into a pissing contest with Paul McCartney, but he's been using my arrangement for the last 30 years and he never had a problem collecting a Grammy for it. It is over the top and it is saccharine, but the thing is, the song itself is. And, I think it's kind of false logic to say that, if you got rid of Phil Spector's stuff from A Long and Winding Road, it would suddenly be this real kind of rocking song. It wouldn't. It's a melancholy song anyway, and I think Phil's just got this thing of like, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound or a dollar. If you're going to do a song like this, go totally overboard. Now, it wasn't just this one; it was Across the Universe as well, which I might play after this, which is slightly different in a way, because it was not really a love song as such, but it's another gentle, very organic song. It was John that time, and it was obviously fairly badly played. The original, not that anything John did is bad, but it's rough and ready. And again, Phil added kind of violins and stuff. And again, it makes it, to my mind, it makes it transcendental. It takes it beyond just being a rock band, and it makes it something, sort of more cultural. Now, it could be argued that a lot of the excesses of the 70s started with all this, because the 70s music could be very pompous, and certainly a lot of the prog rock had these sort of big violins and stuff. The whole career of ELO, for example, could be based on what Phil Spector did with the Beatles. Even though I like ELO, but they were quite pompous, let's be honest, and a lot of the 70s stuff was like that. So it could be argued that what Phil Spector did really was to sort of really how the 70s would proceed. Did it affect the final album in terms of popularity? Well, it made number one. It was still a huge seller. There were some singles from the album. I think A Long and Winding Road was a single itself, and I think it made number one. So it's certainly commercially successful. Mind you, anything the Beatles would have done would have been commercially successful. What do you guys think, really? I think I'll leave it there. It's a bit of a rambling talk. It's the first one I've done. And we can carry on the conversation if anyone wants to. But I'll just summarise to say, there's the history of it. Let It Be. It was supposed to be a filmed rehearsal session for the Beatles, followed by a gig. It didn't really work out. They left it halfway through. They went on to do Abbey Road. Brilliant album. Their last proper album. The dregs of the Let It Be sessions were given to Phil Spector to sort of try and get something from. He added loads of orchestrations, loads of sort of female operatic stuff, and turned it into the Let It Be album. Big commercial hit, lots of singles, Grammy Awards and everything, but this sort of ongoing feud with Paul McCartney, who says he hated what Phil Spector did to it. And I'm saying, on balance, I get that. I get why it's kind of alien, especially if you're quite a purist about kind of rock being rock and the Beatles being a rock band. Do you really want this sort of easy listening stuff over it? But on balance, I say the Beatles were dead at this point, and someone needed to acknowledge that. And maybe someone from the outside, and maybe someone like Phil Spector, who was equally successful, was the only person who could actually, give that kind of Gordon Ramsay straight talk and just say, look, it's over, it's it, you've got no passion anymore. This is where you're at. And I think that's probably why Paul doesn't like it really, or didn't like it for so long, is I think basically what Phil did was emotionally honest and accurate. And I think Phil was actually in resonance with Paul, was really out there. So I think it was a matter of ego, mainly on Paul's part, and denial, that he really didn't want to accept that the Beatles were over. He was still seeing the Beatles as this functioning rock and roll band, whereas to Phil's insight, I think, he saw that it was dead, and therefore he wanted to give it a really good send-off. So let me know what you think, and we'll try and find another classic, controversial song to talk about next time. If you've got any ideas, let me know. See you later, and sorry for all the technical hitches. It's take one. It's like Let It Be itself. We just set the camera running, let it film, and then if someone needs to fill Spector up the video at the end of it and add loads of fluffy bunnies, then get in touch. All right, see you later.